Hello, beautiful people, and welcome to Drawing Down the Stars and Searching for Dragons. I'm Snappy, and I'm joined by my dear friend and co-host, Graham Quinn. How's it going, Graham?
Good, thanks. How are you?
Amazing, amazing. I'm really excited to be back. It's been a while since we've done a Searching for Dragons, and this is one that's been in a real long time coming. In fact, I
Yeah.
believe this was one of the first books you mentioned when we were first discussing even doing a show, right? And that you have been holding on to this book, Wizard of the Crow, for a few years, just dying to explain it to someone. Remember? Isn't that the case?
That is the case. I found this book back in 2006 when it was first published in English, and I said, one day I'll find an audience to rant to about this. And the time has finally come.
The time has finally come, and I don't want to spoil too much, but we're just going to dive right in because this is going to be a long episode, and this will be a part one, a part two. Wizard of the Crow is a 700-page tome, and we are going to try to explore it and do it some justice. But before we do that, we want to talk about the author here, Ngūgī wa Thiongo. So can you tell us about the author and set us up for the story of this magical work?
Yeah, so Ngūgī wa Thiong'o was born in 1938 in Kenya. I got all this information from his official website. He was born into a large, as he calls it, a peasant family, so farmers and workers. And what's important about Ngūgī's life is that in his adolescence and early adulthood, he lived through the Mau Mau War of Independence from the 1950s to the 1960s, which was really it was a decade-long battle between locals and the British government, who was ruling at the time. And this eventually led to the British government being replaced by a Kenyan government. And this was the sort of central theme of his early works. And he wasn't just an author; he was also a playwright, and he was very active in the theater scene in many African countries. So his first major play, The Black Hermit, was performed in Uganda in 1962 as part of the celebration of Uganda's independence. And then shortly after that, he wrote 8 short stories, 2 one-act plays, 2 novels, and he was a regular columnist for the Sunday Nation. So, within like a 3 or 4 year period, he released all of this in the 60s. And eventually, in 1967, he becomes a lecturer in English literature at the University of Nairobi. And he teaches there for 10 years. And during his tenure, he was at the center of the politics because he was the head of the English literature department, and he pushed with a declaration along with two other professors. He published an essay on the abolition of the English department, claiming that English is not an African language. We should be learning African literature and the literature of other cultures as well, as in addition to English culture. And this became very central in a lot of post-colonial theory.
Oh, of course.
So
yeah.
very important with, he was very adamant about bringing the culture back to the people.
That's so beautiful. Yeah, the first time I'd ever heard this name was because my degree was in religion studies, but I did a kind of a through the lens of post-colonial studies, and English literature is kind of like where all of the giants of post-colonial study and theory kind of come out of, and Thiongo is up there and is well known, so really interesting person, and not just on the forefront of literature, but on the forefront of academia is what I want to stress to people. This is an extraordinarily accomplished human being,
Very extraordinary. He in his theater, what he was very adamant about, which I'll talk a bit more about later, though, is that he brings it from the lens of traditional African storytelling, in the sense that it's myths that everyone knows that have a twist to them. And there's no fourth wall in his theater. The audience is encouraged to participate with the performance.
That's beautiful.
So very reminds me of Greek theater in some respects.
In Artaud, in some
Um,
respect.
and Artaud is exactly. And what's important though is that in 1977 he publishes his novel Petals of Blood, and it painted a harsh and unsparing picture of life in neo-colonial Kenya, and it was received with emphatic critical acclaim. And that same year, he releases a play called "I Will Marry When I Want," written with Ngūgī wa Miri, and it was performed at an open-air theater with actors from the workers and peasants of the village. It was sharply critical of the inequalities and injustices of Kenyan society, and publicly identified with unequivocally championing the cause of ordinary Kenyans, and it was committed to communicating with them in the language of their daily lives. For this performance, he was arrested and imprisoned without charge by the Moi dictatorship and held at the Community Maximum Security Prison for an entire year.
Holy crap.
So the government did not like him criticizing them.
No.
And it was during this period while in prison that he decided to abandon English as his primary language and committed himself to writing in Kikuyu, which is his ethnic language. And he writes an entire novel on toilet paper while in prison called Kitani Mutharabeni, which translates as Devil on the Cross, which wasn't published until 1982.
Wow.
And Amnesty International named him a prisoner of conscience, and he was released in December of 1978. But still, the Moi dictatorship barred him from jobs at colleges and universities. He continued to be an uncomfortable voice for the dictatorship by writing and participating in the theater. And while he was in Britain for the launch and promotion of Devil on the Cross, he learned about the Moi regime's plot to eliminate him on his return to Kenya. And so he was thusly forced into exile. So he lived in Berlin for a long time and then the US. And during this time, the Moi dictatorship kept trying to get him banned from different countries he would travel to. There was an assassination attempt in 1986 outside his hotel in Harare, which was pretty wild, unsuccessful, but pretty scary. And his next Kikuyu novel, Midigari, was published in 1986. And undercover police went to all the bookshops in the country and the publisher's warehouse and confiscated the novel. So from 1986 to 1996, Midigari could not be sold in Kenyan bookshops. All of his books were removed from all educational institutions.
Wow.
So people really wanted to silence his voice. When at the end of the Moi dictatorship, he returned to Kenya in 2004, and they were attacked again by 4 hired gunmen. And so since then, he has continued to live in the United States, in California, where he is, I believe, the head of the literature department at Irvine.
Oh, wow.
And in 2006, he published what is considered his crowning achievement, which is Wizard of the Crow, which is what we'll be discussing tonight. So I kind of jumped around a lot there, but it's just important to note that he was a very active voice for the people. Something really important to point out is that, especially in his later works like Wizard of the Crow, there's a multi-narrative and multi-viewpoints that unfold at different times and spaces, which replace the linear, the typical linear plot. And so, in other words, as they like to put it on their website, the collective replaces the individual as the center of history.
Oh, wow. That's so interesting. I want to see how that unfolds, what that perspective looks like. That's beautiful. What an incredible man, a writer, a playwright, an activist, an academic, a professor. Wow. And someone who stood against tyranny and the dictatorships of what was the dictatorship called again? Maui?
Moi. It was the Moi. That's the last name of the dictator. He was the second president of Kenya, I believe, after the British left.
Yeah, incredible. I need to learn more African history, but this man sounds amazing. So tell us more about his magnum opus here, The Wizard of the Crow.
Yeah, Wizard of the Crow. I have it right here. It's a great book. I discovered it by chance in 2006. The title jumped out at me, so I picked up the book and I started reading a few pages and I said, okay, this is coming home with me.
Amazing.
In his
So
own
what struck you?
words,
The imagery or the title? Like what drew you?
the title and the imagery just really something about it, the aesthetic and the name. I just said this sounds really interesting. So then I read about it on the blurb, was even more interested, read a few pages within the book, as I always do when I pick up a random book. And it's been one of my favorites ever since. This was been for 18 years now.
Amazing.
So it says here in his own words, it is nothing less than to sum up Africa of the 20th century in the context of 2,000 years of world history.
Oh my gosh. What a grandiose kind of scope. Okay.
Yeah. So it's set in an imaginary African dictatorship called the Free Republic of Abyreria. And the novel dramatizes a battle for control of the soul of the Abyrerean people. And it jumps between many perspectives, from the ruler, the eponymous wizard, who's an avatar of folklore and wisdom. We find the corrupt Christian ministry, and as they call it, the nefarious global bank.
Amazing. The ruler, the wizard, the global bank. Oh man, we got some intriguing characters already.
Yeah. And what's important about this book, about the narrative, is that it's all told in a traditional storytelling fashion, in the sense that one of the characters in the novel is the narrator of the novel.
Okay.
And so there's this layer of meta that's happening. And the most important thing to take away from this book is that, as I like to say, the myth becomes reality. So time and again, we'll see something happens in the story. It's relayed by the storyteller to the people. It becomes exaggerated into some sort of myth or folklore. And then this myth becomes accepted as truth and replaces the original act that was being described.
We see this everywhere. If anyone who's grown up in the modern internet age is so aware of this phenomenon of myths taking on and coloring people's perception. Anyone who paid attention to the last election in the US, this is going to be ultra relevant, it seems. All right.
So let's dive in.
Okay.
We start with each book. I won't go through the entire book, obviously, but each section is named after a different daemon. So first we have the power daemons.
Power daemons.
There were many theories about the strange illness of the second ruler of the Free Republic of Abyreria, but most frequent on people's lips were 5. The illness, so claimed the first, was born of anger that once welled up inside him, and he was so conscious of the danger it posed to his well-being that he tried all he could to rid himself of it by belching after every meal, sometimes counting from 1 to 10, and other times chanting ka, ke, ki, ko, ku aloud. Why these particular syllables, nobody could tell. Still, they conceded that the ruler had a point. Just as offensive gases of the constipated need to be expelled, thus easing the burden of the tummy, anger in a person also needs a way out to ease the burden on the heart. This ruler's anger, however, would not go away, and it continued simmering inside till it consumed his heart. This is believed to be the source of the Abyrerean saying that ire is more corrosive than fire, for it once eroded the soul of a ruler.
Oh, wow.
But when did this anger take root? When snakes first appeared on the national scene? When water in the bowels of the earth turned bitter? Or when he visited America and failed to land an interview with Global Network News on its famous program Meet the Global Mighty? It is said that when he was told that he could not be granted even a minute on the air, he could hardly believe his ears or even understand what they were talking about, knowing that in his country, he was always on TV. His every moment, eating, shitting, sneezing, or blowing his nose, was captured on camera. Even his yawns were news, because whether triggered by boredom, fatigue, hunger, or thirst, They were often followed by some national drama. His enemies were lashed in public square with a sjambok. Whole villages were blown to bits, or people were pierced to death by bows and arrows squad, their carcasses left in the open as food for hyenas and vultures. It is said that he was especially skillful in creating and nursing conflicts among Aberrarian families, for scenes of sorrow were what assuaged them and made him sleep soundly. But nothing is seen would now temper his anger. Could anger, however deeply felt, cause a mystery illness that defied all logic and medical expertise?
Oh, wow. Seeing that violent ruler become consumed by their own hate and anger. Interesting.
The second theory was that the illness was a curse from the cry of a wronged he-goat. It is said that some elders, deeply troubled by the sight of blood flowing from the land, decided to treat this evil as they had epidemics that threatened the survival of the community in the olden days. But instead of burying the evil inside the belly of a beast by inserting flies, standing for the epidemic, into its anus, they would insert the ruler's hair, standing for the evil, into the belly of a he-goat through its mouth. The evil-carrying goat, standing for the ruler, would then become an outcast in the land, to be driven out of any region where its cry announced its evil presence. Led by a medicine man, they mixed the hair obtained secretly from the ruler's barber with grass, salt, and magic potions, and gave it to the goat to swallow. Needle and thread in hand, the medicine man started sewing the 7 orifices of the body, beginning with the anus. The struggling he-goat gave out a blood-curdling cry, and before the medicine man could seal its mouth, it escaped. It is said that it cried grief across the land until the ruler heard the cry, and learning about the curse, which he imagined to be a call for a coup, sent soldiers to hunt down the he-goat and all involved. Rumor has it that the goat, the barber, the medicine man, the elders, and even the soldiers were given over to the crocodiles of the Red River to ensure eternal silence about the curse. And it was to mark this day of his deliverance that the ruler had the picture of the Red River added to bury notes, the only picture besides his own to honor the Aberrarian currency.
Holy crap. We're just going to pause there for a second.
Yeah.
This is so intense. We're having this whole imagery of the scapegoat, which is such an ancient and primordial almost image, right? Where you have something that is a stand-in for the city or the people, or in this case, the ruler, that is then embodies all of that evil, that sin. You also see this in things like the sin eaters in Europe, right? And
right.
And that thing is cast out into the wilderness. But this whole sewing of the 7 orifices, that's some dark violence. And then the fact that it escapes and continues to cry, what a profound and scary image. And when we get to this point where the ruler's freaking out and goes and has everyone involved murdered to prevent this curse, and then marks the occasion by putting the river where he killed them all on his money. Whoa.
It's pretty wild. We'll learn that the ruler is quite the Saturnian narcissist. Very much a tyrannos.
Okay. Keep going. That's wild.
Still, he worried about the fact that the goat had a beard, and he secretly consulted an oracle in a neighboring country, who assured him that only a bearded spirit could seriously threaten his rule. Though he read this as meaning that no human could overthrow him, for since they had no bodily form, spirits could never grow beards. He became sensitive to beards, and then decreed what came to be known as the law of the beard, that all goats and humans must have their beards shaved off.
Okay, pause for 1 second, because he goes and consults an oracle who gives him some kind of really oblique, obscure prophecy. This sounds like something right out of ancient Greek mythology. I love it.
It does.
The tyrant banning beards, like this could be Oedipus or something. Beautiful.
Yeah, it's wild. There are some who dispute the story of the bearded he-goat, and even argue that the law of the beard applied only to soldiers, policemen, civil servants, and politicians, and that the herdsmen shaved their he-goats out of their own volition, for shaving goats' beards was then being the fashion among Aberrarian herdsmen. These skeptics wondered, what has the cry of a he-goat whose anus, ears, and nose being sealed have to do with the strange illness that befell the ruler. Others now came up with a third theory, which said that since nothing lasts forever, the illness has something to do with the aging of his rule. He had sat on the throne so long that even he could not remember when his reign began. His rule had no beginning and no end, and judging from the facts, one may well believe the claim. Children had been born and had given birth to others, and those others to others, and so on, and his rule had survived all the generations. So that when some people heard that before him there had been a first ruler, preceded by a succession of governors and sultans all the way from the eras of the Arabs, the Turks, the Italians, to that of the British, they would simply shake their heads in disbelief, saying, "No, no. Those are just the tales of a daydreamer. Aberia had never had and could never have another ruler, because had not this man's reign begun before the world began, and would end only after the world has ended? Although even that surmise was shot through with doubts, for how can the world come to an end?"
Okay, we're already within the first few paragraphs seeing the myth making continuously unfold in multiple ways, right? The first was, they're going to deny that the ruler is sick. Then they're going to deny that they did anything to stop the goat or that the goat ever existed, right? Now we're getting to this whole complicated thing where the ruler has always ruled. He's eternal. He's this God king, and then the world will never end, and everything will be the ruler, and that all of that history is gone. It's like, holy crap.
Right? The myth becomes reality. That's this book in a nutshell. This next part is pretty wild. It's a few pages long, so I'll just skip ahead to certain points. I'll let you know. The fourth theory asserted that his illness had its origins in all the tears unshed that Rachel, his legal wife, had locked up inside her soul after her fall from grace. The ruler and his wife had fallen out one day when Rachel asked questions about the schoolgirls who rumors claimed were often invited to the State House to make his bed, where he, like the aging white man of the popular saying, fed on spring chicken. Of course, the ruler would never admit to aging, but he had no problems with the white man comparison, and so he amended the proverb to say that a white man renews his youth with spring chicken. Imagine pretty vile. Imagine how he must have felt about Rachel's attempt to deny him his fountains of youth. How indiscreet and indecorous of her to ask the unaskable. Since when could a male, let alone a ruler, be denied the right to feel his way around women's thighs, whether other men's wives or schoolgirls? What figure of a ruler would he cut were he to renounce his right to husband to all women in the land, in the manner of the lords of old Europe, whose droit de seigneur gave them the right to every bride to be?
Oh, wow. He's imitating the white man. He wants to be like one of those British kings, right? We saw this even in the introduction when you talked about how he was so pissed off being in America and they wouldn't even give him a minute of screen time,
Definitely. It's wild. So Rachel thought she was being reasonable. And then we'll jump ahead to the next. Yeah, we're on the right one here. There is always a difference between a thought and its description. What the ruler had been dwelling on when lowering the fork to the table and wiping his lips with the corner of the napkin was not the fate of a ruler who wept and so lost his throne, but rather what he would have to do to make Rachel understand that he, the ruler, had power, real power over everything, including time. He shuddered at the thought. Even before the shuddering completed its course, he had made up his mind. Speaking with studied calm, a faint smile on his face, he told Rachel that the unfinished meal would be their last supper together, that he would go away to give her time to think about the implications of her allegations, and since she would need space to think, he would bring to pass what had been written in the scriptures. In my father's house are many mansions, even for sinners. He built her a house on a 7-acre plot that he surrounded with a stone wall and an electric fence, and it was while contemplating the unbreachable walls the idea of a building that reached. But we shall talk about that later, because the idea was given expression by one of his most faithful and adoring ministers. What was indisputably the project of his own genius in its conception and execution was the construction of Rachel's mansion.
Can we pause for a second? Just because I want to, because there's some stuff that's blowing my mind because it's making me think again of all these other myths, right? Like this is a kind of a classic. He's identifying himself as time. First off, the most Saturnian thing imaginable. He's in control of time. He's being rebuked for his advances on young virgin girls. Where do we see this in the mythology? I immediately think of the story of the goddess Diamuta, the mute, and Zeus, who rebukes him for trying to pursue one of her sisters, the nymph Joturna. And for this, has her tongue ripped out, and then she's cast into the swamps and is raped and impregnated and then and imprisoned. And you see this, there's many reflections of this too. There's also I can't remember the name now. Oh my, but there's very similar story where in the Greek mythology where you'll see, or the Latin, I believe, where you'll see women get imprisoned. Like what's that story? It's the inspiration for anyway, it doesn't matter. But so many mythological connections. It's just wild.
Very much so. All the clocks in the house were frozen at the second, the minute, and the hour that she had raised the question of schoolgirls. The calendars pointed to the day and the year. The clocks tick-tocked, but their hands did not move. The mechanical calendar always flipped to the same date. The food provided was the same as the Last Supper, the clothes the same that she had worn that night. The bedding and curtains were identical to those where she had once lived. The television and radio kept repeating programs that were on during the Last Supper. Everything in the new mansion reproduced the exact same moment. A record player was programmed to play only one hymn. Our Lord will come back one day. He will take us to his home above. I will then know how much he loves me whenever he comes back. And when he comes back, you, the wicked, will be left behind, moaning your wicked deeds whenever our Lord comes back.
Oh, wow.
The idea of the endless repetition of this hymn pleased him so much that he had amplifiers placed at the four corners of the 7-acre plantation, so that passers-by and even others would benefit from the tune and the words. Rachel would remain thus, awaiting his second coming, and on that day when he found that she had shed all the tears for all the tomorrows of all the children she accused him of abusing, he would take her back to restart life exactly from where it had stopped, or rather Rachel would resume her life, which had been marking time like a cinematic frame on pause.
That is so wild. I am your beginning and your end. I am Alpha and Omega. This sounds like, yeah, it sounds like Christianity, right? Holy shit, right? I'm going to imprison you, and you know, you're going to have to wait and come back and seek forgiveness and beg and submit to the hand of God. Holy
Submit.
shit.
Exactly. Let's jump ahead 2 slides. Yeah. Despite this, Rachel was always in the ruler's mind, for he received daily reports of her moods and activities, how she spent her day, how she slept, the words she muttered to herself, everything. What he yearned to hear was any news of her tears, the one sign that would unerringly point to her breakdown and desire for redemption. But he didn't. It is said by those who hold the fourth theory that Rachel, aware of this insatiable desire for humiliating the already fallen, had sworn that she would never let him see her tears or hear about them, not even from her children or the numerous spies. And the more she held out, the more he needed her self-abnegation. Her tears had become the battlefield of their wills. The trouble with this theory was that it relied either on rumors or whatever could be deduced from the behavior of the ruler's children. It was also the least known of the 5 theories, because it was whispered only among people who trusted one another, for who would be so foolish as to talk about this openly unless he courted death?
Wow. That's so wild. Holy crap.
It gets crazier.
I'm sure. The strange illness thing and all of these
Rumors.
conspiracies and rumors that all take on lives of their own and spawn new and twisted mythologies.
There are others who to this day are ready to swear that the illness had nothing to do with burning anger, the anguished cry of a wronged he-goat, the aging rain, or Rachel's tears, and theirs was the 5th theory, that the illness was the sole work of the demons that the ruler had housed in a special chamber in the State House, who had now turned their backs on him and withdrew their protective services. It is said that the walls and ceiling of the chamber were made from the skeletons of the students, teachers, workers, and small farmers he had killed in all the regions of the country. For it was well known that he came into power with flaming swords, the bodies of his victims falling down to his left and right like banana trunks.
Holy
This
crap. Cutting people down with flaming swords, putting them in the walls and ceilings of his chamber. These rumors are getting quite insane.
right? It escalates rather quickly. The skulls of his most hated enemies hung on the walls and others from the ceiling, bone sculptures, white memories of victory and defeat. The chamber was a cross between a museum and a temple, and every morning the ruler, after first bathing in the preserved blood of his enemies, would enter carrying a staff and a fly whisk, and then walk about quietly, looking at the various exhibits one by one. Then, about to leave, he would suddenly stop at the door and glance one more time at the chamber, and with mocking gestures of triumphant contempt at the dark holes and grinning teeth where one's eyes and mouths had been.
Oh
What were
my
you?
gosh. Okay, there's this wild song by this band Propagandhi called Rattan Cane, where they talk about almost use the same line, these dark holes and grinning teeth that are left after being cracked with a cane when you
Oh
break a
wow!
line. But oh my god, what was I wanted to say? Okay, the cross between the museum and a temple. Okay, and that's a wild image right there. And every morning, the ruler, after bathing in the preserved blood of his enemies, carrying a staff and a fly whisk, the staff, which is that serpentine power, and then the whip. Like, this is such mystery cult stuff that they're
It's a,
accusing him of.
it's peppered in all over. It's pretty wild. What were you after? He would ask the skulls as if they could hear him. This fly whisk, this scepter, this crown? He would pause as if expecting an answer, and when the skulls failed to respond, he would burst out in guffaws as if daring them to contradict what he was about to say. I plucked out your tongues and tore your lips to show you that a politician without a mouth is no politician at all. But there were times when it looked as if the skulls were grinning back in counter mockery, and the laughter would stop abruptly. You fucking bastards. It is your own greed and boundless ambitions that led you here. Did you seriously think you had a chance to overthrow me? Let me tell you, the person who would even dare has not been born, and if he has, he will still have to change himself into a spirit and grow a beard and human hair on his feet. You did not know that, did you? He would add, pointing at them with his staff menacingly, his mouth foaming with fury.
Taunting the oracles of his dead enemies in their skull forms. Jeez. Oh,
Just
wow.
wild. Let me say, as the narrator, that I cannot confirm the truth or falsity of the existence of the chamber. It may turn into a mere rumor or tale from the mouth of Ascari Aragaigai Gathir. He is a character we'll learn about later. But if it exists, simple logic proves that it was the ruler's morning rites in this chamber of skulls long ago, before the ruler's fatal visit to America and any talk of his illness, had given rise to a rumor that quickly spread throughout the country. Whenever two or three gathered together, the very question was about the rumor. Can you believe it? Did you know that the ruler is a devil worshipper and that he worships his lord and master Satan in the name of a serpent?
Holy shit. There we go. He's a
There we
serpent
go.
cultist.
Yeah. The rumor about devil and snake worship took root in all Abereria following one of the most ambitious programs for birthday celebrations in honor of a ruler ever undertaken in the country.
Amazing.
Everybody in the country knew something or other about the ruler's birthday, because before it was firmly set in the national calendar, the date of his birth and the manner of its celebration had been the subject of a heated debate in Parliament that went on for 7 months, 7 days, 7 hours, and 7 minutes. And even then, the honorable members could not arrive at a consensus, mainly because nobody knew for sure the actual date of the ruler's birth. And when they failed to break the impasse, the honorable members sent a formal delegation to the very seat of power to seek guidance, after which they passed a motion of gratitude to the ruler for helping the chamber find a solution that had completely defeated their combined knowledge and experience. The birthday celebrations would always start at the 7th hour of the 7th day of the 7th month, 7 being the ruler's sacred number, and precisely because in Aberia the ruler controlled how the months followed each other. January, for instance, trading places with July, he therefore had the power to declare any month in the year the 7th month, and any day within the 7th month the 7th day, and therefore the ruler's birthday. The same applied to time and any hour, depending on the wishes of the ruler.
Could be the 7th hour. Wow, always the 7, right?
7 is his number.
Yeah, crazy.
That's crazy. So now we come to the assembly. So there's a national assembly for his birthday. That's all we need to know about this one. More people turn out to the celebration than usual because there's a rumor that there would be a cake which the ruler would multiply into to feed the masses, the way that Jesus Christ once did with 5 loaves and 2 fish. So we have lots of hungry people showing up. We can jump ahead to the ruler's right sat the Minister for Foreign Affairs in a dark striped suit and a red tie with a picture of the ruler, the emblem of the ruler's party.
He's his own sigil.
Yeah. The story goes that Marcus used to be an ordinary member of parliament. Then one day he flew to England, where under the glare of publicity, he entered a London hospital, not because he was ill, but because he wanted to have his eyes enlarged, to make them ferociously sharp, or as he put in Kiswahili, Yahweh Macho Kali, so that they would be able to spot the enemies of the ruler, no matter how far their hiding places. Enlarged to the size of electric bulbs, his eyes were now the most prominent feature of his face, dwarfing his nose, cheeks, and forehead. The ruler was so touched by his devotion and public expression of loyalty that even before he returned home from England, the ruler gave him the Minister of Foreign Affairs, an important cabinet post, so that Mako Kali would be his representative eye wherever, in whatever corner of the globe lay the ruler's interests. And so Mako Kali he became, and later he even forgot the name given at his birth.
Wow, so now we're seeing the mythological narrative of his right-hand man, right? Who is appointed because of loyalty, really, right? Forget about the magic eyes for a second. Though that eyes, that piercing glare is a powerful magical image. Very interesting. And that, it makes me think again of that Zeus energy, because Zeus is Simpergato with Apollo, and Apollo is the light, right? Apollo is his sun and is the active force of Zeus on earth. It's interesting. Anyway.
Right. I hadn't thought about that before. To the left of the ruler sat another minister, the minister of state in the ruler's office, dressed in a white silk suit, a red handkerchief in his breast pocket, and of course the party tie. He too was started as a not particularly distinguished member of parliament, and probably would have remained thus, except that when he heard of the good fortune that befell Mako Kali, he followed suit. He didn't have much money, so he secretly sold his father's plot and borrowed the rest to buy himself a flight to France and a hospital bed in Paris, where he had his ears enlarged, so that, as he also put it in a press statement, he would be able to hear better and therefore be privy to the most private of conversations between husband and wife, children and their parents, students and teachers, priests and their flock, psychiatrists and their patients, all in the service of the ruler. His ears were larger than a rabbit's and always primed to detect danger at any time and from any direction. His devotion did not go unnoticed, and he was made Minister of State in charge of spying on the citizenry. The secret police machine known as M5 was now under his direction, and so Silver Sikioku he became, jettisoning his earlier names.
Again, we're seeing the same kind of pattern where you see, and it's also the eyes to see, ears to hear. And you have the eyes and the ears of the ruler, right? And interesting. Wow. And again,
Very
it's
bizarre.
about this loyalty, and it's about spying, right? The first guy could spy on everyone with that magic sight. This person can listen. And the interesting part is that wants to listen to people and divide them, like parents and patients between, and students and teacher. Like, wow.
Revolution can start anywhere, right? So you got to always be listening.
Dividing people.
Exactly. So, as Makakali announces, the whole country, the Minister for Foreign Affairs was saying, the entire Aburian populace, this is kind of a lie, had decided unanimously to erect a building such as had never been attempted in history, except once by the children of Israel, and even they had failed miserably to complete the house of Babel. Aburiria would now do what the Israelites could not do, raise a building to the very gates of heaven, so that the ruler could call on God daily to say good morning, or good evening, or simply, how was your day today, God? The ruler would be the daily recipient of God's advice, resulting in a rapid growth of Aburiria to heights never before dreamt by humans. The entire project, Heaven Scrape, or simply Marching to Heaven, would be run by a national building committee, the chair of which would be announced in good time.
Oh, wow. Referencing Babel. That's so interesting, right? And that Babylon, the story of Babel is even older. It goes back to Greece, right? Because it makes me think of Hermes and the confusing of the languages, you know. But there's a lot of that's such an interesting thing. And then the ruler's got to build his tower to heaven, that giant phallus to draw down that great mother, to scrape the sides, to show his grandiose power, right? You got to have the biggest penis.
Yeah,
But this is
the
something that you
tallest
see
tower.
constantly, right?
It
Egypt,
is.
all those pyramids, right? And well, there's more to it, right? That tall tower draws down the great mother. The mountain is the mother. The mountain wants, the mother wants that phallus. That's, they want to unite the earth and the sky in that sexual union. But it's also that power of ascension in rising above. So they're going through this mystery rite of building that tower to pierce the sky and to ascend to godhood. Wow. Wild.
Just wild. We
Because
can
that's what
jump
they were
ahead.
doing on Babel, right?
Yeah, exactly. We can
Sorry,
jump
sure.
ahead 2 slides. Yeah, here we go. It was obvious from the smile that hovered around the edges of his mouth as he countered Sikioku's challenge that he had something else up his sleeve, and when Makakali announced it, it would take even the other ministers by surprise. The Global Bank would soon send a mission to the country to discuss marching to heaven and see if the bank could loan Aburiria the money for its completion. After a dramatic pause to let the news sink in properly, Makakali called upon the ruler to accept marching to heaven as a gift of a grateful nation to his ruler. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday, dear ruler. Happy birthday to you. He doesn't have a name. He's just the ruler.
He's just the ruler, right? Yeah, because he's become that incarnate deity, right? He is the tyrant. He is Saturn. He is, or the feminine equivalent, Despoina, Dictina, Turan, right? We see this so often. Even Zeus, right? That just means God,
Yeah.
Interesting.
So the ruler, a staff and a fly whisk in his left hand, stood up. His dark suit was almost identical to that worn by Makukali, but on careful examination, one could see that the stripes were made of tiny letters that read, "Might is right."
Oh, whoa. Okay. We got to pause there because this is a very famous saying, and some people, it may go over people's head, but there's a very famous political polemic that was written in the early, or mid 1800s anyway, by a pseudonymous writer by the name of Ragnar Redbeard. And this was a book called Might is Right, and it pushed forward this idea of social Darwinism, but more so this idea of the strength of the individual, and that who could do something. If you can do it through force, then it is totally valid, basically.
Oh, wow.
Wild stuff. But yeah, it's like far right, intense propaganda of the most vile kind.
Doesn't surprise me that it's here then.
No, it shouldn't, right? It's that image we're trying to evoke, that tyrannical image, and this is a perfect example of it on full display. Might is Right. Another proponent of Might is Right that was an inspiration for Ragnar Redbeard was, and he didn't use that phrase, but very much the same idea, would be the Marquis de Sade. Another beautiful human being, you know what I mean? Whoa, so we're getting into some darkness right here, folks.
Yeah. Rumor had it that all his clothes were made to measure in Europe, that his London, Paris, and Rome tailors did nothing else but make his clothes. What distinguished his clothes from all imitations by all political fawns were the patches on the shoulders and elbows of his jackets, because they were made from skins of the big cats, mainly leopards, tigers, and lions. In short, no politician was allowed to wear clothes with patches made from the skins of his mighty cats. This special feature inspired the children to sing how their lord walks the earth like a leopard, lights a path with the eyes of a tiger, and roars with a lion's fury.
We're just seeing so much magical myth building and transforming this man into deity. His mighty cats and creating these laws. Now you can't kill cats, and he walks the earth like a leopard. He has that lion's fury. This makes me think of Dionysus.
Right. Let's skip ahead one more.
Sure.
So as he's giving his speech, he's giving his thank you speech. But suddenly, so in the middle here, he stopped, for suddenly near the center of the multitude issued a blood-curdling scream. "Snake! Snake!" came the cry, taken up by others. Soon there was pandemonium. People shoved and shouted in every direction to escape a snake unseen by many. It was enough that others had. The cry was now not about one but several snakes. Unable to believe what was happening, and with none wanting to be the first to show fear, the cabinet ministers cast surreptitious glances at one another, waiting for someone to make the first move. So everyone's chanting "snake," the crowd's going crazy. To calm things down at the bottom here, the police chief shot his gun into the air, but this only made matters worse, and the melee turned into a riot of self-preservation as people took to the heels in every direction. After a few minutes, only the ruler and his entourage of ministers, soldiers, and policemen were left in the park. The head of secret police woke up from a stupor and whispered to the ruler this might be the beginning of a coup d'etat, and within seconds the ruler was on his way to the State House.
Oh, wow. We've seen the first sign of a snake in the grass.
Yeah.
Causing the panic. That illness taking root in the tyrant, coming to
Yes.
claim.
The multitude melting away and leaving him and his retinue alone on the fields made him boil inside. What message has this sent to the world? Where had all the M5 gone? Why had these services not heard anything about those snake people? He kept asking Sikioku. To save their skins, the head of M5 explained that the snake people were members of an underground party, the movement for the voice of the people, and that the intelligence agents had known all along about them but had kept the knowledge to themselves to buy time, to sort out the truth from rumors, to get at the roots of the entire movement. It was not a good idea, they explained, to give the group unnecessary publicity before the fullness of its perfidy was known. One does not rush to hit a snake before it has fully come out of its hole.
We're seeing again another form of myth making. Now his officers, in order to protect themselves, just invented a voice of the people movement. Like, what the frick?
This made the ruler even angrier. And so you gave it time to come out of its hole? How dare anybody say I cannot strike a snake before it has fully revealed itself? Who says that I don't have the power to strike at that which is most hidden from view? Sikioku's attempts to diffuse the ruler's wrath by explaining that his statement was only a proverb made matters worse. Was Sikioku suggesting that there were proverbs that superseded the ruler's mighty sayings? The ruler had power over all proverbs, all riddles and aberraria, and no proverb could bar him from hitting the hidden, even the most inaccessible of holes. To remind people of this point, the ruler decides to address the nation.
Okay, 1 second before we go there, because I just want to point out another interesting mythic image. Who says I don't have the power to strike at that which is most hidden from view? The far shooting, striking in the darkness, these are all titles that you'll see associated with the light-bringing deities, namely Artemis, Hecate, Apollo, Dionysus. Interesting.
Wild. Very interesting. So he's embodying so much myth here.
Yeah.
The performance carried live on all the airwaves was visually compelling, and people talk about it to this day. His government knew, he told the nation, that certain malcontents, the self-styled movement for the voice of the people, had duped university students into scattering plastic snakes at gatherings. He wanted to remind the nation that in direct response to their wishes, the government had long ago banned all political parties. In Abereria, there was only one party, and the ruler was its leader. Let it be known to the entire world, he declaimed, that from this minute, the movement for the voice of the people ceases to exist above ground or underground. The ruler was the sole voice of the people, and they loved it so.
Okay, I just got to point out this again seems to parrot reality in the sense of I have seen people freak out about student protests and conflate them. Oh, those aren't students and they're not united in a normal protest. It's Antifa. It's the Antifa super soldier warriors out to overthrow us. And you're just like, what the hell? Like, and now we're seeing this, right? Where they're transforming these students who are doing a small protest with snakes. Now you are the face of the voice of the people movement, which is not even flipping real. And then he's like, now the voice of the people cease. The moment he can see it and label it as something else, he can wipe it out, right? So by attaching it to those students, he can raise it into an image. And now he's destroying it. And I'm the only voice of the people. And you love it.
It's pretty wild. I mean, we'll see that the voice of the mood of the people is not silenced so easily, but he likes to think so.
Wild. Well, we know that the myth is going to create reality. He's going to manifest the voice of the people, right? Just like the right manifests the Antifa super soldiers. It's freaking hilarious. You know?
Wild. To fight the lies of these terrorists, he ordered the formation of a new squad, his mighty youth, and he asked all schools and college students to join and become the ruler's youth wings. Does this sound familiar?
Oh my God, Hitler-Jugend, what the freak?
Their main responsibility was to tell all the land that his might was the might and the light of the nation. The wingers would teach the catechism. Aberarians can never have a party except the ruler's party, or worship political idols imitating the ruler. On his mighty service would be their motto, and this would be inscribed on all their badges, stationary clothes, and vehicles. OHMS.
Oh God, this is right out of England by her by Her Majesty's service on. Oh my gosh. Satire is thick in this.
It's thick. It's thick. The ruler paused to allow that to sink in within the minds of his televiewers. And then came what has become the talk of all Abereria and probably the basis for the rumor of snakes, devil worship, and supernatural powers. Emphasizing the warning he was about to issue, he pointed at the cameras with his club-shaped staff as if at the terrorists of the movement for the voice of the people. He, the ruler, would outsnake all their plastic terrorist snakes with real ones. In biblical times, it was the Mosaic snake that swallowed the pharaonic ones. Today in Abereria, it is the pharaonic snake that will swallow all of you who think you are the new Moses.
Oh my God. So he's becoming the devil worshiper. He's becoming the snake, which was, again, started out as a fake rumor, just as the voice of the people is becoming this real thing, which was a fake rumor. Whoa.
The myth becomes reality. And suddenly he raised the club higher in the air as if ready to throw it at any and all self-styled Moseses. The cameramen ducked behind their cameras, and all at once, as if hit by the same object simultaneously, every television screen in the country split into 7 pieces. The viewers did not know whether the ruler had actually thrown the club or simply had the power of mind to disintegrate their screens. Disagreements remain to this day.
A deep theological question, you know?
Yeah. Whatever the truth, the television performance did inspire a new snake dance, which became all the rage, so that wherever and whenever 2 or 3 young people met, they would move their bodies, heads, torso, and hands in serpentine motions as they sang, "The pot I made is broken. Little did I know that freedom would wear a viper and a devil."
Man, this guy is getting it all. He sees it on so many levels. You're right. That community perspective is really starting to shine through in the way these myths develop and take form through that multiplicity. Wild.
Exactly. That's very succinctly put. Better than I could have put it together. So as a schoolboy in a colonial classroom, he had come across stories of an ancient king of Babylon who used to appear among the populace disguised as one of them. And when later the citizens found out who he was, they were amazed and flattered. A king had walked among them. The image faded in time, but it sprang back to life. And when the ruler tried the idea on his handlers, they said, "Yes, perfect." A well publicized spontaneous Sunday visit to a church to draw attention to his religiosity would surely capture the basis of the malice toward him.
Of course, you
So
got to
they
go
choose,
do your token religious thing, right? You
yeah,
constantly see every dictator, right? They get
yeah.
whitewashed by that religion. Oh God.
The church chosen was All Saints Cathedral in Elders, and what a clever choice. Located between two of the most populous districts in Elders, called Santa Lucia and Santa Maria, the cathedral stood on a hill, and this would make a dramatic scenic background for television pictures. So he gets out of his Rolls Royce and surveys the market before the startled faces of the many fruit sellers who did not know whether or not they should rush forward to lure sales by singing praises for their wares. The ruler saw a lone donkey and, seemingly impulsively as choreographed by his image builders, decided to ride a donkey in imitation of Christ. Some of his Secret Service agents, dressed as ordinary citizens, grabbed some palm leaves from the sellers and laid them on the ground. At the foot of the hill, he got off the donkey and walked the rest of the way. The long camera shots show the ruler at the foot of the hill and the church on the hill, which made him look as if he was leading a pilgrimage to the city of God.
On the
That's
back of a donkey, and this is such a classic. Jesus rides a donkey, Dionysus rides a donkey, Muhammad rides a donkey, right? This is like as primordial as it gets.
very. As it turned out, these following the performance on TV, at home, or in community halls had sensed that something was amiss. When as soon as the ruler set his foot at the doors of the cathedral, they lost the pictures, reminding them of that other time when their TV screens broke into 7 pieces. The glitch denied them a view of what happened next, and they had to glean bits and pieces from those who were there and saw the ruler enter the building.
An
Though
apt
details,
opportunity for myth building.
all the myth, all the rumor and myth. Though details conflict, all agree that as soon as the ruler set foot inside the cathedral, the walls shook as if moved by an earth tremor. Crosses on the walls, people's clothes, or pieces of paper danced strangely as if struggling to flee. And when Bishop Tylas Kanagori placed on the altar a small Bible he had been holding in his hands, the altar shook and the Bible fell to the ground. He did not pick it up, but instead disappeared into an anteroom. And before all had finished wondering what made him abandon the holy book and the congregation, he reemerged, holding a very big Bible in his right hand and a huge cross in his left, both hands outstretched toward the ruler. The bishop's lips were moving as if making an incantation, but nobody could catch his words, and so were unable to repeat them after.
This is
Then
all
the
it
whole
takes, guys. All it takes is for dude to accidentally jostle a book and it to fall for a new myth to be born, and the priest to come out with the big icons.
the big Bible and the big cross.
The bigger the better, right? The bigger. It's all about the image and the performance, and it's better if people can't fully see or hear it, if it's obscured.
Exactly. Then the whole congregation heard the sound of something crashing through a window, breaking the glass into 7 pieces, 7 again. And then, just as suddenly, all the shaking walls and dancing crosses became still, and the whole cathedral was embraced in silence and peace. The sound of Bishop Tylas Kanagori's voice as he continued his ceremonies, if nothing untoward had happened, only served to underscore the silence. At home, all television sets that had a break in proceedings returned to normal. Those already sitting in front of their sets and those who happened to turn on their TVs at that moment found the bishop at the beginning of his sermon. Among the latter group, a few voices ridiculed the tales that went beyond the donkey ride, the palm leaves, the horse hosannas, and the long walk to the hill. So now he wants to do this at Islamic mosques, at Hindu temples, and Buddhist temples. to show that he is that was just a fluke, you know. I'm with it with these other people. So for his visit to an Islamic shrine, he ordered his handlers to look for a mosque without glass windows.
Oh my god. Oh
They
my god.
found a mosque with a beautiful dome and minarets, but more important, with windows of wood and iron bars. An even bigger drama ensued, but since it was not captured on film once more, we have to rely on hearsay that when the imam in charge of the day's ceremony realized on the ruler's entry that something was not right, he quickly raised the Quran in midair and called out in Arabic this prayer that I'm not going to try to read because I'll butcher his pronunciation. Those in
Allahu
attendance.
Akbar, Allahu Akbar, Ashhadu an ilaha illallah, Ashhadu an Muhammadan Rasulallah, Hayya ala swalaha. This is the Fatiha. This is
Okay,
the
I
Fatiha. Yeah.
meant to look it up, but
Yeah,
life's
it's
been
the old,
crazy.
it's like it is the it's what every Muslim says to affirm their belief in Allah, you know? So
Okay, okay. That's good to know. That's important. Because those in attendance say they felt something like wind whirl through the air, and the next minute they heard the iron bars of one of the windows creak, and then saw some of them bend outward as if someone were pushing the bars to set himself free. Brandishing the Quran and the rosary at the window, the imam shouted something like Satan, and lo and behold, the creaking stopped abruptly, and the only sound was the imam calling out Allahu Akbar. There are some who, like the biblical Thomas, doubt everything about this tale, but even they are unable to explain how the iron bars came to be so bent. For it is said that the mosque's ruling council, after much internal debate, decided that they would not repair the window but let it stay like that, a witness to the victory of the Holy Quran over the wiles of Satan, even when disguised in the modern fineries of earthly glory.
so now he's it's backfiring, right? He's trying to go to these religious institutions, and it just they're turning against him, and he's becoming that satanic other, right? That
He
earthly
is.
glory, modern fineries, the wiles of Satan. Oh god.
Some city dwellers put up posters. Eldarius is a devil-free zone.
Oh, right.
It was it was not, for soon they found out that the satanic demons had escaped the churches and the mosques to roam the land. For how else were people to explain two amazing reports that soon began to circulate in Eldares? The first was comic, claiming that Satan visited Maritha and Mariko in their home at Santa Lucia just to pick a fight. I won't get into that whole side story, but basically they're two villagers who are married, and they claim that Satan is cursing them to lust for other people's bodies.
Oh, where have we heard that before? That's a nice,
Yeah,
convenient excuse.
yeah. The
Oh,
scarier second, beyond the realm of religion, told of Satan going about the towns and villages, plucking out people's hearts, leaving their bodies as empty shells on roadsides and dump sites. But there were a few people who argued that the two, Satan's picking a fight with Maritha and Mariko, and Satan's plucking out people's hearts, were connected. A clear case of Satan showing that though he had lost some battles, he had not lost the war. Let's go to the next slide here. They took on the name Soldiers of Christ and vowed to fight till the devil let Maritha and Mariko live their lives in peace. They would arm themselves with the Bible for a shield, a hymn book for a diet, and the cross doubling as a walking stick and a cane with which to chase out Satan. The evil one must move or be made to move. They broke into a call and response battle hymn. Where are you going? Carrying food, armed with the staff. We are pilgrims on a warpath to battle Satan and his worshippers.
and
They
you know what
strode
we're
with hope
seeing?
and
I just
yeah,
sorry. You know what we're seeing on full display here? Satanic panic.
yeah.
Satanic panic. These people under this uncertainty and the scariness of the dictatorship are going freaking insane into that magical thinking, and it's running rampant. And now they're on a crusade against Satan.
If
Holy
if everything is a myth, what can you believe in, right? So they choose to mold their own realities because everything else is a lie.
Yeah, and this gives them an enemy, something to do battle against, something to fight for, and to try to defend themselves, rather than that undying dictator.
Exactly. So now we come to another character in the book I'll spoil a little bit. This is Kamiti, who becomes the Wizard of the Crow.
Interesting.
Bit of a spoiler there. But you'll see how it comes to be. He was tired, hungry, and thirsty, and felt beaten down by the sun. He wanted to climb to the top when suddenly he felt very weak in the knees and collapsed at the foot of a mountain of garbage. He could not tell whether he was in a temporary coma or a deep sleep, but when a slight breeze blew, it lifted him out of himself to the sky, where he now floated. He could still see his own body lying on the ground in the mountain of garbage where children and dogs fought over signs of meat on white bones. The body needs a rest from you, and you need a rest from the body, he heard himself saying to himself. He decided to let his body lie there in the sun, and free of the body, he wandered Abereria. Why leave the exploration and enjoyment of our country to tourists, he said with a chuckle, comparing the conditions in the different towns and regions of the country. This is really funny, he said to himself when he saw that he looks like a bird and floated like a bird. He enjoyed the rush of cold air against his wings. He now recalled a Christian song he had once heard. I will fly and leave this earth. I will float in the sky and witness wonders never seen before being done with the earth below.
Oh,
He
wow.
started to sing, but because he could not open his beak as wide as his mouth, what came out was a whistling reminiscent of the song of the birds he had listened to in the mornings in the wilderness. From his vantage point, he had a bird's eye view of the northern, southern, eastern, western, and central regions of Abereria. The landscape ranged from the coastal plains to the region of the Great Lakes, to the arid bushlands in the east, to the central highlands and northern mountains. People differed as much in the languages they spoke as in the clothes they wore and how they eked out a living. We'll jump to the bottom here. So I am not alone, he heard himself say to his bird self. Maybe he should abandon his human form and remain a bird, floating effortlessly in the sky, bathing in the fresh air of a skyland. But then he started sneezing as a whiff of gases from the factories below reached him. Is there no place on earth or in the sky where a person might escape this poison? A bit confused, he thought that before making any decision about the form in which he would lead the rest of his life, he should return to his body lying in the sun to recover and review the shocks of the day. But what if his body had been completely scorched by the sun? At the thought, he flapped his wings and hurried back to Elders.
Oh, wow. So
So we
he
have
actually has an out of body experience, transforms into a bird, explores the totality of his country, sees its vast diversity, and now he's kind of returning back onto himself.
he sees the diversity and also the
Yeah,
desperation that everyone is in. Everyone is this mosaic of people that are all suffering.
wild.
And he arrives on a minute too early because there's a rotation truck full of garbage that pulls up. And I'm not going to read all the next few past slides here. All I'm going to say is that the garbage men come out, they examine his body to see if he has any like money on him, and then he sneezes and gets back up, and they run away thinking that he's a devil.
Of course. Another rumor.
So we'll jump ahead three slides here. The stench which hit his nostrils was so strong that it made him sneeze even as he tried to sit up. He started removing garbage from his face. About to get into the passenger side of the lorry, two of the men heard the sneeze. They each stood fixed to the ground. The driver also froze, his hands on the door, one leg on the rung and the other still on the ground. What was that? He asked, but his men did not answer. Having gone to peer at the body risen from the dead, they just ran away. The driver also fled the lorry after his friends, beseeching them not to leave him to the mercy of the devil. But the word devil only served to spur them on. The three were now screaming out, Satan, in different pitches. Not until they saw a group of young men and women with crosses and a banner on which was written the word Soldiers of Christ did they stop to compose themselves and ask for help.
Oh, God. So wild. Turning to religion to stand up against the tyranny.
Yeah. So we'll
Fighting myth with myth.
jump ahead two more slides. There's a long interaction with the garbage collectors and the soldiers of Christ. They adopt the garbage collectors as soldiers of Christ. They call them the sweepers of souls. That's all you need to know for those few passages.
Awesome.
Even today, the soldiers of Christ swear that they never once took their eyes off him, but still they cannot explain how the figure disappeared in front of their watchful eyes. All they know is that when they reached the street, they too had seen the figure enter. They met so many people with similar bags that they cannot tell who was whom among the hundreds pushing and shoving one another for the right of way. The devil had vanished.
Does this not sound like Christ, right? And then he was entombed and he was there for 3 days and then the body disappeared.
The book Hewing Demons. So now this is where we learn the name of this character, which is Kamiti. And Kamiti always had a strong sense of smell. The smell is important here. Even as a child, he could scent things in distant places. His power smell was so strong and animal-like that he often knew the identity of a person before they appeared. He could follow, if he concentrated hard enough, the trail of a person. He was sensitive to the different smells in a crowd. But the smell he had recently begun to detect was very different from any he had come in contact with before. At first, it was only a whiff among many others, but it intensified to a point in which it assaulted him from all around. He could not tell whether it was coming from the mountains of uncollected garbage, the factories in the industrial area, or simply from human sweat. It did not smell quite like rotting leaves. It was more like the stink of rotting flesh. Not of dead flesh, but of a human body at once alive and decomposing, and yet not quite. It was intensely familiar and unfamiliar. The rot was stronger in some people than in others. When he first became aware of it, he used to wonder if it emanated from his own belly because of hunger or fatigue. But in the wilderness, deep in the forests away from elders, the smell was absent, no matter how hungry, thirsty, and tired he was. Walking among people in towns and cities, Kamiti often tried to suppress his sense of smell and pretend that the nausea he felt was an illusion. That way he could get on with looking for jobs without constantly thinking about odor. So he has the snout to sniff, you could say. He detects a rottenness from certain people and certain buildings.
Interesting. The scent is often, scent is high mystery. This is a hugely powerful thing in all of the mystery rites, in all of the magic. All of the deities in the Greco-Roman tradition have a smell. Medea smells of sulfur. The Kori smells of wildflowers. They say Aphrodite has a certain kind of feminine smell. It also, like, the fact that this guy's a magician and he can smell the corruption. It's interesting.
Very interesting. Very interesting. It's smell is so interesting. Like you get like I think it's called the Proust effect when like memory is evoked by smell. It's like the sense that's most connected to memory or something. I remember reading, but anyways.
Let's continue.
Yeah, let's jump ahead. So this page, all he's saying is, let's jump to the middle. He's debating whether to beg or to continue starving. But he says, prayer, after all, is a form of begging, and it was the cornerstone of all religions. Ask and it shall be given. Every day, followers of the different faiths, whether named after Jesus or Muhammad or Buddha, get on their knees and beg God for this or that. They pray to their Lord and Master will hear their cry. Yes, prayers are blessed. Begging is blessed. Among the followers of Buddha, the holiest are known by their vows of poverty, and they are sustained in the path of holiness by begging. So here he's trying to convince himself that it's okay to beg for food. He doesn't have to starve to death. So we'll go to the next slide here.
It's also just such egoic insanity, right? Like, I'm not begging. I'm like the fucking Buddha. Like, right? Jesus and Muhammad were beggars. Look how great of a person I am. Like,
yeah,
the myth making never stops.
That's a good point. That's a good point. I hadn't considered that before.
Like, what egoic nonsense.
Hilarious. We'll jump to the bottom here. He could not believe his eyes. Right across the street was a signboard, Aldair's Modern Construction and Real Estate, and beside it a billboard, a job. The word blotted out all the others around it. Rising from the dead, he was now delirious with hope. And
Ooh.
I won't go through the job interview here. Needless to say, the guy who owns Aldair's Construction deeply humiliates him and then leaves. And this is the secretary speaking with Kamiti now. May I sit down? She asked. Kamiti did not respond. The woman sat down beside him anyway. For a few seconds there was nothing but silence between them. Then Kamiti heard the sound of sobbing, a whimper coming from the woman. He did not want to shoulder anyone's burden. He had enough of his own, but he was sensitive to suffering. What is the matter? Why could he not tell you there were no vacancies and leave it at that? Why the calculated insult? It's all right, Kamiti said, struck by the way her words echoed his own. These are really the ogres said to have two mouths in front and at the back. In stories, Kamiti said in a tired, almost indifferent tone, he was unaccustomed to making connections between his woes and those of the community at large. Yes, the woman said, but those in stories are more human by comparison. Why? He asked in the same tone. Because in those stories, or because those in stories sometimes get tired of human flesh and swallow fried flies for a change. But the modern ogres live on people all the time, and they never stop. It's all
Wow.
right. It's all right, said Kamiti. What do you mean it's all right? It is the way of the world, Kamiti said in the same indifferent tone, wishing that the talk would end and she would go away. I don't understand. The world has no soul. Then change the world. Give it a soul. He said nothing for a while. Is she one of those who talk of revolution? To Kamiti, damaged souls produce damaged policies, not the other way around. Some people have a sickness of the heart. Cure them of the sickness and good will follow. For him, the human soul inherited badness or goodness, and there was nothing anybody could do about that. Yet it was clear that he had not given his position much thought, and he was just mouthing it. Listen to me. The world will always be what it has always been. Luck rules our lives. So he's just been
This
defeated.
sounds like. Go ahead, sorry.
No, go ahead.
I was going to say that sounds like Fortuna. Luck rules our lives. The goddess Fortuna tormented them, and this is such a Dionysian thing. All you can do is go forward and adapt and change, and the world is this lawless, crazy place, right? And the only law of nature is that adaptation, right? It's that primal golden age kind of ideology. Whoa.
Definitely. That's a good way to put it. Hadn't thought of Fortuna. So now we jump ahead a bit. He goes to Paradise to beg. And Paradise is a large hotel in what's called the Ruler's Square. It's where all like the rich and hoi polloi kind of go to hang out, basically. So we can jump ahead a couple slides here, because basically there's a convention where the global bank is going to come to meet with the organizers of Marching to Heaven, who are building the Tower of Babel. The global bank has sent some ministers, I guess you could say.
Are they going to object to the ruler? Ooh, interesting.
We shall see. So basically, there's a mix of people. There's people waiting to hear what the result is. There's the media who are there to cover the event, and there's a large host of beggars. And amongst the beggars, we'll go ahead one more slide here. Global Bank had come to appreciate. They're hoping the Global Bank had come to appreciate and even honor their plight. So they sang, "You are the way, we are the world. Help the poor" in different languages, because the delegates were assumed to have come from all corners of the globe. The beggars would occasionally push one another out of the way, but as long as they did not try to break through the cordon around Paradise, the police did not interfere. Even when goaded by some, the police remained calm, at least for a while.
Oh, I just got
But
to
almost,
point out one thing.
yeah,
You are the way, we are the world, help the poor. That's Michael Jackson. We are the world, We are the children. Oh my God. Most cynical, like charitable bullshit being screamed by the mouths of these beggars that are, tolerated in the front
I
of this
mean,
paradise hotel of capitalism in the global bank. Like, think about the grandiose power and wealth that they're begging at
it's
this.
the extreme juxtaposition of the dire poverty and the excessive wealth.
Right. Intense.
Almost as if an answer to the prayers of the media, a group of beggars started shouting slogans beyond the decorum of begging. Things like, marching to heaven is marching to hell. Your strings of loans are chains of slavery. Your loans are the cause of begging. We beggars beg the end of begging. The march of heaven is led by dangerous snakes. And this last slogan was chanted over and over. Many observers agreed that the slogans would have elicited nothing more than gentle rebuke from the police but for the mention of the word snakes, all too reminiscent of those snakes that had disrupted the ruler's birthday celebration. So we'll jump down to the bottom. He was determined not to make the same mistake again. He did not even consult the ruler. He gave the orders. Although they had tried to be stoic and some even aspired to good humor, the police had been chafing under their order of restraint. So they were now jubilant about the business at hand. With their riot gear, clubs, shields, and guns, the police attacked the crowd. Birds of a feather may flock together in times of peace, but when there is danger, each flies alone. A miracle appeared as the beggars dispersed. Those with humps fled upright. The blind could see once again. The legless and armless recovered their limbs as they scurried from the gates of paradise.
As they fled, they gained that powerful strength, right? And they're begging, if those who were lying all of a sudden were transformed. Oh my God. Wow, what intensity. And these people act without the ruler's explicit direction now, right?
Yeah,
They're acting on what he thinks. There's oh man, intense. To protect that paradise, right? In that
to
capital.
protect their capital, exactly, and their good face. So now, two unfortunate beggars found themselves chased by three police officers. Covered in rags from head to toe, both carried bags clutched tightly, which was their undoing, for the police had convinced themselves that the bags were full of bury notes the two had been collecting all day and night. Their six eyes more on the bags than on the beggars themselves. The beggars found wings. So we'll skip ahead here to the next slide. All that we need to know is that all of them give up except one officer. And the remaining police officer seemed possessed because by now he had forgotten why he was running, even as he increased his pace in a pointless pursuit of shadows of rags in the prairie. They came to a bush, and though it was darker inside, the leading beggar, followed by the second, dashed in. The police officer did not hesitate and ran after them, only to fall down, trapped by something hard like a stone. Soon he was up and running again through the bush, now guided only by the sound of the beggar's footsteps. Were they running him in circles? Between the bush and the outskirts was an open space. The police officer could see only one beggar crossing it and re-entering Santa Lucia. Where had the other one gone, he wondered, as the beggar he had in sight disappeared behind some houses. By now the two beggars were ensconced in a house, crouched near a window. One beggar peered through another window, and yes, he could now see the police officer and what he was doing. His gun drawn, the policeman was going from door to door, interrogating residents.
Oh God, now terrorizing to find these beggars, right?
Yeah,
Such
have you
insanity.
it's fanatical. Have you got a piece of paper? One of the beggars asked to his fellow. These were the first words they exchanged since their flight from paradise. The beggar addressed said nothing but looked through his bag and took out a piece of paper. No, not so small, bigger. And see if there are any bones, dry cobs of corn, rags, and a piece of string in there. If he was surprised by the request, he did not show it. He simply groped in the dark and came back and produced a cardboard, a bone, some rags, and a string, silently handing them over and continuing his watch at the window. The other beggar tied the bones and the rags together. He then took a felt pen from his bag and wrote on the cardboard in big letters, "Warning! This property belongs to a wizard whose power brings down hawks and crows from the sky. Touch this house at your peril. Signed, Wizard of the Crow." With great care not to make any noise, he slowly opened the door and saw something even better, a dead lizard and a frog. He added them to the bundle of bone and rags and hung the omen above the door before quickly retreating to join the other beggar at the window. So here we have the Wizard of the Crow revealing himself. Crouched together, the two beggars could make out the area around the doorway. They saw the police officer walk near, anxiously wondering what he would do. But when the officer saw the bundle of rags and bones, he took a step back. He gathered courage and approached the bundle. He was about to touch it when he saw the leg of a frog and the tail of a lizard, and he was petrified. On reading what was written on the cardboard, he found his voice and let out an anguished cry. "Oh, the Wizard of the Crow!" He took to his heels, muttering to himself all the while. "I knew they were not thieves. They were devils, jinns of the prairie, sent by the Wizard of the Crow to trick me to death. Woe unto me, I am now bewitched. Woe unto me, I am going to die. Actually, I am a dead man walking."
Oh my god, that's
The two,
amazing.
so superstition wins in this instance against the police officer.
Oh my god.
So they take off the beggars take off their clothes and realize that one is Kamiti and the other is Nyawira, who was the assistant who he was talking to before, who was like, "Give the world a soul." They realize that they made their paths cross once more. And so on they have a meal together, which we skip over here. And then they hear a knock at the door. And so she answers it. "What do you want?" Nyawira asks gruffly, trying to hide her panic. "I beg you." Oh, sorry. We're go ahead too. Here we go.
Yeah, okay.
"What do you want?" Nyawira asked gruffly, trying to hide her panic. "I beg you, don't be angry. I am the police officer who was here last night. I mean, I happened to be in Santa Lucia last night, and in passing I saw something hanging from the wall. When I went home, I thought about it. True, Hakia Mungu." That is Swahili for like on God's truth, or like it's a swearing on God. It's like an oath. "I tell you, I hardly slept trying to figure things out. So I came to the conclusion, perhaps, then the doubt, how shall I know the house? But I gathered my courage and came here before dawn. And imagine my relief when I found the thing still there. And I said to myself, you are in the right place." Chagrined, Nyawira remembered the bundle of make-believe witchcraft hanging from the roof outside. How careless of them not to have it taken down. The magic that had sent the police officer away had led him back to the house, though now he seemed unarmed. She became a little defiant within. So what if he has found us? What could he arrest us for? What crime have we committed? Then she recalled that the dictator of Aberiria had decreed that the movement for the voice of the people was illegal. So she resolved to remain calm and scrutinize the words of the police officer for anything that might be useful. "What do you want?" she asked imperiously. The police officer winced at her tone. He kept looking over his shoulder as if ready to bolt at the first hint of danger. Yet he seemed determined, almost desperate, to unburden himself of something. "My name is Constable Arigagai Gathir. I have many matters that weigh heavily on me. Please, mother, I would like to see you." "Me? You want to see me?" she asked, puzzled by all this. "Yes, you. No, yes, true. Hakiya Mungu, wizard. I would like to see you. Sorry, I need to see the Wizard of the Crow." The story that they came to hear over and over again was about the night AG, who's Arigaga Gathir. They call him AG for the rest of the story. AG chased two beggars from the gates of paradise. At first, he used to say he was with two other police officers, but in the course of the telling and retelling of the story, they disappeared from his
Yeah,
narrative.
he's only on his own now, as is wont to happen.
Yeah, and it is revealed here that AG is the narrator of the book as well. Is what we learned that in passing here. Yeah, and he says it all began outside paradise, where we made sure the visitors to the Global Bank would not be harassed by the crowd of beggars. We'll skip ahead to the next slide. It seemed to me that the man was not alone. There was another walking beside him, guiding him through the dark. How do I explain? Now I see one. Now I see two. When I tried to stop and take stock of the situation, I found I could not slow down. True, Hakiya Mungu, and eventually I found myself in the prairie. Don't ask me how I got there. To this day, I don't know. There was moonlight, but clouds would get in the way. It was as if the heavens were conspiring with him to play games of light and shadows with me. He made me run around in circles the whole time. Then I saw him go through some bush, and I followed him. It was dark in the thick growth. I tripped over something and fell. It was a rock cleft in two. I got back up and resumed running. Only when I reached the other side of the bush did I realize I was near Santa Lucia. Between the edge of the bush and where the houses began was an empty space, and as the man crossed it, I saw that what I had taken to be two was actually one. And yet I could have sworn that I had seen two persons. No sooner had I blinked than the man was gone, and as there was no gap in the hedge, I could not tell how he got through. You mean to tell us that you did not even see him jump over the hedge? Some would ask him. No, I didn't. True, Hakiamungu. Maybe he turned himself into a hedge, another would suggest. Yes, you have said it.
He became a hedge, guys. You're here to hear first.
He transformed himself into a hedge, of course. Of course. I put my new plan into action, and then how should I tell it? Suddenly I felt a force take a hold of me, turn me around, and compel me to look at it. One glance at the thing hanging from the roof, and I knew that I was facing powerful magic. Approaching it, I saw some letters jump from the wall toward me. Warning, this property belongs to the wizard whose powers can bring down even crows from the sky. Touch this door at your peril. Signed, Wizard of the Crow. Then the letters retreated into the wall. Foolish me, I was about to touch the thing when I felt hands I could not see lifting me up. They swung me in the air and dropped me to the ground again and again, 7 times. When I was released, I fled and did not once look back. That was why early in the morning I went back to the House of Magic. The bundle and the writing on the wall were still there. He opened the door for me, and do you know, listen to this. The man appeared to me in the form of a very beautiful woman. At first, she asked me questions in a soft voice. Then all of a sudden, a voice boomed from the back of his or her head. I am the Wizard of the Crow. Who is that standing in the shadow of my magic? How dare you break my circle of magic? Go, clean those feet first, before I did not wait to hear more. For a second time, I fled for my life. So, well, I'm going to skip ahead here. All that's important is that the Wizard of the Crow keeps telling him to leave and come back. First it's, you're breaking my circle of magic. Go home and wash your feet. Then he comes back. Then he says, come armed, come unarmed. So he leaves, he comes back. Then he says, come armed without, like in civilian clothes, not as a policeman. So he leaves and comes back.
He's done it 3 times already.
Yeah, and AG, the police officer, is telling in this story, this is the magic that he has over him. He makes him leave and return this many times, you know? He's like possessed him. But he says, that man, I swear, true, Hakiamungu, that man, he is human, yet more than human. For AG, the words conveyed not malice, but awe, respect, and admiration, for he told his listeners, all that I am, all that I have now, I owe to the craft of the Wizard of the Crow. How could I not obey his first words of command? Without any hesitation, I ran all the way to my place where I washed my feet and hands over and over again, and within the hour I was back in Santa Lucia. I was careful not to touch the door or stand too close to it. The door opened all by itself as if to invite me in, and I entered the sacred grounds of his living space. Then I heard another command, step in front of the small window. The window looked like that of a confessional in a Catholic church. We're on the next slide now. Yeah. Except it had no lattice, and one could clearly see his face and eyes. But what eyes? They were more like balls of fire. Your heart is a little weary, the voice said. Yes, yes, I said quickly. Weighed down by many burdens? Yes, yes. A particular burden that brings you to the Wizard of the Crow. His voice was round, soft, and soothing, so different from before that I could not tell whether he was making a statement or asking a question. You have spoken my thoughts exactly, I told him. You see, I've been in the police force for many years, and no matter how hard I work, I've never been promoted. Wizard of the Crow, I am sure I have enemies who are hindering me through magic. Is your heart telling you that? Yes. Why? What makes you so sure? It's the truth. Because the heart never lies. You see, I am a workaholic. When I'm on traffic duty, for instance, I hand out more tickets than any other cop. I am hard on machatus. Those are like human bearing carriages. I ask
Oh yeah.
myself, why is it that I have not been promoted? And I always hear the same whisper. There is a person whose shadow crosses yours. The person whose
Oh,
shadow crosses yours, do you know him? No, no. Such people work in the dark. He could be anybody, my neighbor or one of my workmates, or for that matter, any of the Matachu drivers to whom I've issued tickets. What do you want from me? My heart was beating loudly. I had not realized how bitter I had been toward my enemy, whoever he is. But that aside, he will now know that I am none other than Constable Aragaigai Gathir. Never again will he harm my career or anybody else's as he has had all these years. Look for him everywhere, ferret him out, remove him from the face of the earth. To kill a man, you know that is a hard thing to do. Not for us, the ruler's police officers. Any life that threatens the ruler's power is nothing to us. Nothing at all.
oh wow. That's terrifying.
Right? You, you have spoken the truth, I told Wizard of the Crow, because if I knew who my enemy was, it would be easy for me to blow him to pieces. But as I don't know who he is, he torments me whether I am awake or asleep. So I ask myself, how is it that somebody can always be on my mind and in my heart, and yet I cannot say who he is? Now you have made me understand. It is because he comes in the form of an evil spirit. Yes, it is not easy to kill spirits. Believe me, Wizard of the Crow, I have been to every witch doctor in and around these towns and villages, and to each I have given the same riddle. I have enemies I don't have. Who are they? And none has been able to ease my torment within so that I can sleep soundly. What makes you believe that I am capable of what others have failed to do? I know your power. Last night, when I set my eyes on the bundle of magic hanging from the roof, I felt my legs rooted to the ground. I said to myself, here is the wizard for me. You have already proven me right in thinking so. You are the only one to solve the riddle of the enemies I know I have and don't have. For the first time, I know who my enemies are. They masquerade as evil spirits. Not that I needed proof. You who can make birds lose the power of their wings. Yes, you who can bring down even crows and hawks from the sky. How can a mere mortal resist your power as a spirit or not? Wizard of the Crow, your very name is proof of the powers you possess. So he's created inadvertently, this person is turning him into this magical, mythological being called the Wizard of the Crow.
Just making it up as he goes, all based upon like some misplaced spell. Like what? It's so
Yeah, yeah.
wild.
Do you have a
How
mirror?
mythic.
Yeah. It's wild. It's like the conclusions that people will jump to in their minds about other people, you know?
Right.
Do you have a mirror? He asked me. No. You don't carry a mirror? No. How do you look at yourself? I am clean in my ways. I never look in the mirror too often. How do you know if you hardly ever look at yourself? I just know. You told me that sometimes you're on traffic duty. Yes. Have you ever stopped a driver in a vehicle with no mirrors? No mirrors. How can you drive without mirrors? A driver of a vehicle without mirrors is a menace to his own life and that of others. Even a broken mirror poses danger. You
What a
said that
cop.
there are shadows. You said there are shadows crossing yours. Yes, we need mirrors to see our shadows. We need mirrors to see other people's shadows crossing ours. You can rent mine for 2,250 burries, he told me. I didn't I
I
didn't
love
have
how
much.
this wizard has quickly figured out how to take advantage of this new role.
Yeah, I didn't have much money on me, so I told him I would come back in the afternoon. For the third time, I was back at the premises of the Wizard of the Crow. The door again opened by itself. But as I was about to enter, I heard the voice say, I must not defile the sacred grounds with a uniform, badge, and gun. Do you hear that? The Wizard of the Crow made me return to my place 4 times that day. This was what finally convinced me of his powers. Have you ever heard of a witch doctor with an eye for that kind of detail? I put on my civilian clothes, and in no time I was back. Deeds define needs, and the promptness with which I executed his commands and wishes must have convinced him of my desperate need for a cure against the ill design of my invisible enemies. He told me to put the money on the table, which I did promptly. Listen very carefully, he told me in the same soothing voice. Close your eyes and then empty your head of all thoughts. In the shadows of your mind, a picture will form. And when it forms, I will capture it in the mirror, the way fax machines and computers copy images and transmit them invisibly. Once the image is a captive in my mirror, I will take a sharp knife and scratch it, and from that moment your enemy will vanish forever.
Beautiful.
I covered my face with my hands, shut my eyes tight, and waited. And indeed, after a few seconds, somewhere in the darkness of my mind, an outline of an image was forming, but I could not tell whose it was because it kept changing shape and location. Still, I shouted, yes, I can see an image, but it is slippery. Your enemies are very cunning, very slippery, but there, hold it there, he ordered me. Whatever it is, try with all the power of your mind to hold it still, and don't let it go. There, like that. The sound of his knife scratching the mirror made my teeth hurt, as if they were being scratched. All at once I saw the vague image in my mind explode into 1,000 stars, disappearing into the edge of the darkness in my mind. His image, is it still there? No, I answered, it's gone. Stars disappearing in the dark. That's it, he said. I opened my eyes and felt a strange sensation. True, Haki Yamungu. This person who is now telling you the story. This person you now see in front of you. This person who answers to the name Constable Aragagai Gathir. This man felt tears, but they were not tears of sorrow but of joy, at having the burden of many years lifted from my heart and from my life abruptly. Go home now, he told me in a gentle voice, and all you have to do is find out if there has been a road accident involving the tattoos. If not today, then tomorrow. If not tomorrow, then the next day. Your enemy is most likely one of the fatally injured. From today on, never molest a beggar, a diviner, a healer, a wizard, or a witch. If you ever do any harm to the helpless, this magic will turn against you. Everything that you have, including peace of mind, will be taken away. Go now. Your actions will be the mirror of your soul. Look into the mirror always.
That's amazing. I'm so glad the wizard at least tried to curb the violence of this horrible cop. You know,
Yeah, yeah. So it's saying it's your ego. So you see, that's why I have said that the man is human, yet more than human. He removes all burdens from the heart. I say that because I used to trust my actions completely. I've told you that I'm a workaholic, and yet he was asking me to look at my own actions. Maybe the enemy was hidden within my actions. Had I known that, I would have discovered my enemies much earlier, and I could have spared myself a lot of torment. I again returned to my place of work, having changed into a police uniform, and now had no worries in the world. So,
beautiful.
you know, our enemies are hidden within our own actions. I think that's a very important message in this book and
Absolutely.
in life as well. That's kind of how we're going to leave off part one here.
Oh
Part two,
wow.
in part two, I'll choose specific slices in the story. I had to set up the characters a little bit here, but in part two, I'll jump ahead to specific moments of the Wizard of the Crow's magic.
Wow. So this is such a wild, incredible story. So let's just try to kind of summarize and go through what we talked about, since it is kind of a raveling narrative, like that
It
is
is.
expressed through multiple perspectives. So the first part we were looking at the ruler and all of these myths that were coming about around the ruler, turning him into this satanic force, and creating this voice of the people movement and this illness, all of this horrible stuff to come and replace him, and it's everything he was doing to prevent it wound up creating it. It was very, very much an Oedipal type story. It was really interesting. And then we saw the creation of the wizard, right? And like this kind of just happens by chance. And we see the cop kind of just say, "You're clearly a wizard. I saw your magic work." And it's all like happenstance. But at the same time, the wizard does give this grandiose advice. He does create a magic right, like seemingly out of thin air. Like, what is your perspective on this wizard? What's going on here?
Yeah, so there's some context that I skipped ahead on in the story just for the sake of time. But
Mhm.
Kamiti reveals to Nyawira that when he was younger, he was taught traditional medicine and folklore.
Okay, so he does have a
And he's a
background.
master of he's a master in herbology. He understands a lot of this witchcraft, but was told never to practice it.
Okay, interesting. So now it's like he's been giving permission, where before he wasn't supposed to do it, even though he was trained to do it, and now he's become the wizard of the
He's
crow.
using it to he
Oh,
uses it to save himself as a scapegoat almost, and now it's transformed him into this wizard-like character. And we'll
right.
see that people flock from all over the region to come see him, and he's like, "Oh my god, like I want to be
Well, he has this
done with this
Christ-like.
role."
He has this Christ-like thing where he dies and is reborn. It's freaking wild, you know. So,
Yeah.
so, and that was the biggest takeaway I got from part one is just the power of mythology and story transforming, and it's like this guy is a special person, but he's also not all that special. The wizard. It's like it's
He's
the
just
it's the attention. Go
it's
ahead.
the intention, exactly. He himself does not really believe in magic, but he performs these rites for people in hopes that it will bring some solace to them, and it ends up actually doing that. And because of that, he becomes this thing of legend, this Wizard of the Crow, even though it's a task he does not want thrust onto him. We don't choose our destinies, right? We find them.
So wild, so much intensity. That ruler character, so
We'll
such
come back to the
brilliant
ruler.
intensity, and just oh man, yeah. But what is your takeaway and your thoughts? What do you want to leave the audience with for part one here?
Um, I want to leave them with the thought that, again, from the last slide, maybe the enemy was hidden within my own actions. We need to look at ourselves, examine ourselves, know ourselves, and be aware of the fact that, like the road to hell is paved with good intentions. We all cause harm in the world, even when we're trying to do good,
Right.
and
Well, that was the advice the wizard gives to AG is just be a good guy and stop harassing people and you won't have this fucking problem. And it's also, I think,
exactly.
even if we go back to the ruler, right? If the ruler is turned himself into a satanic image by constantly trying to force this, by building the Tower of Heaven, by trying to engage with these religions, it's like he wanted, and by trying to do all this stuff or to stop the curse, he caused the curse in his own anger, right? I believe that fundamentally it's his own anger and its own hubris that's causing him this illness. All the other stuff is myth. Really. Oh, you're muted by accident there, Graham. You're muted.
Sorry.
No worries. What were you saying?
We'll learn a bit more about the actual illness in part two. It's quite interesting, and it's an illness that afflicts another character in the book as well. And I don't want to spoil it because it's very unique and powerful, I think.
Oh, wow.
But all we need to know is that it is a self-inflicted illness.
Okay.
It is anger and hubris
Interesting.
for sure that brings it on.
Amazing. Okay, I'm so pumped for part two. We will try to do that again either Friday or Saturday next week. So please, guys, return for that. In the meantime, Graham, do you have anything you want to talk about and promote for the audience before we say goodnight?
Things are pretty slow right now. I just released the Asthai, my poetry collection about theater and performance and life. And my band Isosceles Infection, we're still fine tuning the mixes on our new album, so that'll be out hopefully soon. I finally got a large size, high res scanner, so I can start scanning all the pages for my graphic novel.
Amazing. That's
So
exciting.
that'll hopefully still be out at end of January. And that's about it for now. Oh yeah, I'm also in the proofreading stages of Murder the Subjectile, which is like a collection of cut up poetry from folks from the online community.
That's going to be so much fun. I'm so excited for all these projects. Everyone, make sure you check out the links below. You can find Graham's link tree. You'll find links to his band and to his publishing house, Things in My Chest. Make sure you go and support him. And tune in next week when we will be back for part 2 of Wizard of the Crow by Ngūgī wa Thiongo. Any final words, Graham?
Any final words? Just love is the way.
Love is the way. And, recognize that you are often your greatest enemy, as we saw in the book. And exactly. I look forward to talking to you guys again next time. All right. Thank you, guys. Peace out and much love.
Master could be, and I pressed my eye eagerly to the grave, and I wondered who his master could be, and I pressed my eye eagerly to the grave, and I wondered who his master could be, and I pressed my eye eagerly to the grave, and I wondered who his master could be, and I pressed my eye eagerly to the grave, and I wondered who his master could be, and I pressed my eye eagerly to the grave, and I